All right, it's 10:30, and I'm going to tell you this right now. It is past my bedtime. So I'm going to do my very best here.
We'll keep you awake.
I mean, I am already roused from this wonderful story. My name is Scott Marquardt. I have credentials before and after the name. None of those are relevant here today because we are here to talk about the best thing, my favorite thing, my hobby, and that is folklore. And before we even begin, I want to preface this with, we are going to be talking specifically about British folklore today, because I am second-generation American from Wales, so I have no problem pointing at the silly folk history of my people and laughing and going, "Ooh, what a funny name." And I know that everyone in this audience should feel safe and appropriate to laugh at colonizers. If we're good with that, here we go. Okay, so I would like to first make sure that we know what's going to happen here. We're going to talk about folklore, we're going to define it, and by the end of this session, hopefully, you will be able to recognize it when you see it in the wild and differentiate it from stuff like history and things like that. And we're going to talk through a couple of tales about how we're going to accomplish that. But also, I would like this to be a grounding space. The energy is buzzing at this convention. If you have walked in this building, you're just like, lightning fingers! So go ahead and plant your feet. Ground that energy and kick back. I wrote one joke for this. And if it doesn't land, I'm going to push through it. I don't care.
I got your back.
But you won't know when it's coming. But it is my intent that we are going to learn a few things, but we're also going to have fun and let some of that energy go, let some of that stress go, and reset a little bit. Okay, so that's where I'm coming from. I'm also recording myself because my ego is too big to fit in this room for me to look at later and refine this. So, defining folklore, I think it's more important to define some terms around it first, so we have a better frame. History is going to play a big factor here. But history is very specifically just the facts. It is the exact facts. It is what happened. It is the truth. Folklore involves a lot of history. It is very intertwined with the history. Sometimes it is referencing the history. Oftentimes it is exaggerating the history. And in at least one case we're going to see here, but it's quite often through most of Western folklore, it is a means to preserve the history. We'll talk more about that in a bit. So what's left? We have the history, but what makes it different? What makes it interesting? What makes it unique? It's the oral tradition. It is that beautiful moment that exists in every one of us of creativity and a fanciful way of understanding what's around us, understanding what we live through and what we are living through and the world as it is. It is understanding change. It is understanding complacency. It is understanding cold nights, hot summer days. It is how we tell each other how we feel about those things. And folklore is specific to groups, which is even better. The oral tradition is such a big part of it, but it's more. It's dance. It's art. It can be language. It can be slang. It can be urban legends. There's another thing we should define, and how is that different? What is an urban legend? An urban legend, I would lump under the folklore umbrella and say it's blatantly not true. Right? It's just a creative lie. But looking back through time, we see a lot of urban legends as warning signals. Don't swim in the brackish water, children. There's a witch that will pull you down and drown you. Not true. But also scaring people to not swim in the disease-ridden pool of garbage. I think is like, I'm an 80s kid. And we all knew of this, like, a spooky house, whether it was abandoned or not. It was always, like, in our minds, we're like, oh, it's abandoned. And we all knew, like, a very specific name of the person. Like, oh, Old Man Jenkins used to live there. And, like, none of us knew where this story came from. But we all knew it. And we would tell it to each other, like, oh, you scare each other a little bit. But ultimately, it was like, yeah, that's a condemned house. If you go in there, the floors are not stable. You could die. In that case, it's about child preservation. Using fear as a vehicle. Is that ethical? It's not really for me to say. But it's a thing that exists, and we keep doing it throughout all of history. So, we're going to be telling 3 stories tonight. And by we, I do mean we. I'll be picking on you all. Deal with it. We're going to be talking about preserving the memory. Folklore preserving the history when history is lost. Again, we're talking about British folklore specifically. So there is a several century span in there where books just ceased to be. The Dark Ages into the medieval ages, even hundreds of years before the Renaissance.
They're doing that now to us.
I have opinions. We're gonna have a story about the different slices of history, folk history, and folklore, and we're gonna see how all 3 of those intertwine and the differences between them. That is a choose your own adventure. That'll be fun. And then we're gonna talk about folklore just as a means to define the world around you. Imagine a pre-internet age. Some of us remember this. Of just being outside and playing in the woods and just seeing just one oddly specifically large tree and being just your mind running wild. Like, why is this tree here? Why is it so big? And just coming up with those stories. But if the whole world was that, and it was that for centuries and centuries, the stories you tell on those cold nights around the cook fire, or in the pub when the drinks are flowing, because beer was safer to drink than water. And that tends to loosen up some people's creativity, which is really reflected in the folk history. So, allow me to take you... Oh, I'm sorry. Let me cite my sources first. A lot of this stuff is batshit crazy sounding, but it's real because it's in a book. Take that with a grain of salt. But my references, everything I'm talking about tonight is coming from either Myth and Legends of the British Isles by Richard Barber, Folklore and Mysteries of the Cotswolds by Mark Turner, or if you are ever looking for a folklore book with which to kill a man, might I recommend The Lore of the Land by Westward and Simpson. That book means business. Okay, so we will start with The Tale of Kenelm. And this one comes to us from some 11th and 12th century writings. This is the UK, or Britain, I guess, is a better term to describe it. Britain coming out of the Dark Ages, and again, it's elitist bullshit, right? But it's the nobles that are like, hey guys, we used to know how to write books. Do we remember this? So it's the wealthy people like actually championing that forward, and we have that now because of that. Whether we feel good about that or not, that's why we have it. And specifically, we're talking about Geoffrey of Monmouth, who is like the biggest fanfic writer of bullshit history, Florence of Worcester, and William of Malmesbury. And this tale is set in the year 788. So, let me take you back to the kingdom of Mercia. We are in Monty Python's Quest for the Holy Grail times. If you just imagine being filthy and somebody clacking coconut halves behind you, you got it. That's where we're at. Not only are we in the greater kingdom of Mercia, we're going to Winchcombe, the capital of which, of course, is Winchcombeshire. Yes, very good. So
is that a sauce?
I know you don't know this about me, but I cannot pronounce the Worcestershire. I can't do it. That was exceptionally well timed and rude. The king, as we all know, Kenelm. What do we know about King Kenelm? King Kenelm founds an abbey. King Kenelm dies. We hardly knew him. However, King Kenelm left us 3 children. The eldest of which, Quendretta, a daughter. By all accounts, an academic. Can read, can write. These are exceptional things for the year 788. We are smack dab in the middle of the Dark Ages. And a woman that can do this. Exceptional. And also, if you read into other accounts, a fair diplomat. Okay. So far, so maybe the kingdom won't collapse. The middle child, another daughter, her name is lost to history. And the youngest child, a son named...
The middle child.
That's the middle child syndrome, named Kenelm, who is 7 years old. He's 7. What do you want? So, by show of hands, who ascends to the throne? The wildly capable Quendretta?
No.
The middle child whose name has been lost to history. Okay, cool. I like mystery child support. I appreciate that. Kenelm.
Clearly.
Oh, curse him having a penis. The world has always been bad. Yeah, you're not wrong. Okay, so Kenelm ascends to the throne, but he's 7. He's 7. So, what does he need?
An regent.
Action
Yes.
figures.
He does need action figures, I agree. But yes, a regent, a steward. The books or the texts that survive refer to him as a mentor, so a tutor, basically. This guy has the excellent name of Ascobert. In some tales, he's referred to as Askbert. Yes, what a great name for a tutor. Askbert.
Ask Jeeves is...
Yes.
Series lost. Great.
You've got another
Primordial Ask Jeeves. Yes. Very good, thank you.
Very good.
So, Ascobert and Kenelm head off into the countryside on a hunting trip, as a 7-year-old and the father figure often do. A piece of information you should all have. Ascobert and Quendretta are dating. Anybody else feel anxious about this moment?
I mean, not till you did that.
Okay. You should feel anxious now. Okay, we are now in the Clent Hills. Ah, yes, we can all picture the Clent Hills. According to Google Maps, it's just down the street from Cadbury World. Yes, that Cadbury. They have an amusement park. It is down the street from the Clent Hills. So, a chocolatey wonderland. According to Google reviews, they have free parking. I don't know what the hours are. They may not have been open in 788. After trekking through the hills, it is midday, and Kenelm is 7. He needs a nap.
That's what I said.
I nailed it.
Yeah. He's a child. What do you want?
A nap.
So, Ascobert puts Kenelm down for a nap, and then begins digging a child-sized grave. A little bit of the cart before the horse, sure, but I think we know where this is going.
I mean, was it an eternal nap that he put him down for? I mean, I think
No,
that's
he's
where
taking
it
a regular nap. He's 7. He's tired. He had to walk through the hills. He's probably on a horse, let's be honest. He was wealthy. So, digging a child-sized grave, thinking, this is still the decision I want to make with my life. The child wakes up, and I will quote directly from the text. He wakes up immediately, imagine a 7-year-old just snapping open their eyes and uttering this phrase. This is not the place ordained for you to kill me. I take umbrage with that delivery. He was 7. Has anyone ever been told anything by a 7-year-old? This is not the place ordained for you to can I have a snack? And Michael's coming over, and no, you're not to kill me here. I have to go to the bathroom.
Are we there yet?
But with that terrifying delivery, he either jams an ash twig or an ash staff into the ground, and something emerges from the soil. Anybody want to guess what it might be?
Sludge. A serpent.
Sludge serpent?
So who did was it
The
the
child.
Okay.
Yeah, on his side, still, laying down, just like
Oh.
sludge
Kind of a
serpent,
plant?
some kind of a plant.
What kind of correspondence is there with with ash?
Was it a
It's
sword?
gotta be important, right?
Oh, ash is, yeah, obviously a very magical wood. That's like, if
Yeah,
you read the
I'm
old
just
like
too
Scott
bad at
Cunningham
that.
books, that's like the penultimate, like for making a besom handle. Or,
It throws lightning. Mm-hmm.
it was, well, in the primary account from Folklore Mysteries of the Cotswolds, it's a bunch of black flowers emerge from the ground, so good on you with plants. In other accounts, it's human hair.
What?
Yeah, imagine this adult man standing in a child-sized grave holding a shovel watching this. He does take this as an opportunity to rethink life.
Oh, good. I think I'm running.
Wild. Yep. From
Yikes.
where? Where would you go, though? This is the king. The king's like a creepy child king laying on his side going, doot, and human hair springing out of the ground while standing in a him-sized grave. He's still like, hey, I'll keep you around. Let's bounce. Ascovert's just kind of like, let's get out of here. So they walk down the street a little bit. Like, I don't know. It's not very clear, but what is clear it is very shortly thereafter, like literally same day. Ascovert's kind of like, okay, got the nerves out, lops his head off. Whoops. Oh, trigger warning, a child dies in this. My bad. So he did have a moment of like, maybe I should, yeah, you know what, I'm gonna do it. So he's like, okay, now I gotta do the hasty grave. So he's gotta dig a second child-sized grave that day.
Why did you
Can't
just
take
You
them
can
back.
take him back?
Because there was hair growing in it.
Yeah, that probably wigged him out. Right?
Before he dug the first
The hair wigged him out.
Were we doing puns? The hair did wig him out? Okay, that's fair. Moving on. So he's digging his second child-sized grave of the day. When what should emerge from the decapitated head of the 7-year-old king child?
Hair.
But no. But obviously, as what happens when any of us would be decapitated, a white dove. And it flies away. But where does the dove fly to?
It flies home and tells the sister.
It goes and grabs the hair to make a nest.
Make a nest. We got goes and like tattles to Quindretta. Any other guesses?
Where they cry.
To the archbishop.
It flies to Rome, just beyond Cadbury World. But what's the problem? Oh no, the Pope doesn't speak English.
The bird does?
The bird speaks English?
Ah, very astute. No, the bird was carrying a scroll
Oh.
describing the dirty deed in English, dropping it off in Rome in 788 to a Pope that doesn't speak English. Ah, what a conundrum. Fortunately, because this is a British tale, there was someone who spoke English in the court of the Pope, because that is, of course, a godly language. Why not? So, the normal chain of succession when such a message is delivered to the Pope. We all know it. Pope calls up the Archbishop of Canterbury, calls up remember King Kenelm for the 2 seconds he was alive, established an abbey, calls up the monks there. The monks, they're on the case, but they need a specialist, somebody who knows the Clent Hills. And who do we call?
Ghostbusters.
Ah, that was good. No, they get a cow.
What?
Yeah, who knows the hills better than a cow?
Literally no one.
Literally not. There is a bit in the folklore about, and this is even something you can still find. So Kenelm is spoilers canonized at the end of this tale, so it's Saint Kenelm, and there is still a spring in the Clent Hills called the Well of Kenelm. You want to know how it came to be? I'm going to tell you. Don't worry about it. So they were moving this cow through or it might have been a boy, just because of placement of parts. But they were moving this particular bovine through the countryside. Stop for a break. Look away. Look back. Where the cow's standing underneath, it appears that there's water springing up from the ground.
So,
Right?
this child's got a pee-pee pool?
Yeah. It's pee. Yes. That's a fun Catholic tradition. I digress. The cow does in fact lead them to where the body is buried. The blade that was used to do the deed is buried with them.
So it was a cadaver cow.
Detective Moo Man? Perhaps? CSI. Well, they're like, oh dear. Oh dear.
It was a cow.
So they gather up the remains and the blade, and they have a funeral procession for the king, coming back through Winchcombe. Very upset that things have gone somewhat sideways. My favorite part, Quendretta is angrily shaking a fist from a high tower, and curses the procession by reading Psalm 108 backwards. What is that supposed to do? I don't know.
Brings your cow back, brings your dog back.
No, that's not
But what happens when you read Psalm 108 backwards? Prepare for some whiplash. Any guesses?
Curses?
Her eyes burst! That's right!
What?
Wow.
Yeah! Sudden! Trigger warning, there's eye damage.
The trigger warning's typically before.
Okay, well this had some violent content and should not have been listened to by anybody. Okay.
So I don't know what Psalm 108 is. What is?
It's like nothing special. I looked it up. It's like
just a random.
like
whatever.
God is good and like we're gonna like walls of protection and just Google it. I don't know.
I thought it was gonna be something like really.
I'm just doing shtick.
It's just the biblical version, like when you play the Beatles album backwards, and supposedly there's like Satan or whatever.
That's a Boston album. Yeah. That's where the real devil lives. Yeah, and my favorite part about that is it explicitly states that it's not that she has no eyes that she can no longer read. It's that there's eye goo on the page that she cannot read the page anymore.
Ew.
Thank you.
The
Okay,
page is ruined.
but how does this tie into anything interesting?
I mean, it's all been pretty interesting.
Right. So this is my example of folklore preserving history for future generations. This is a tale that transpired in the oral tradition, 1788, was picked up in writing in the 12th century, and then in 1815 there was an excavation of Winchcombe Abbey, which was a real place. And two coffins matching, there's extra detail in here, this is very boring. But archaeologists used the detail of this folk tale to identify two coffins buried in a very particular place with a blade in one of the coffins in a specific part of the foundation of the abbey as Kenelm and Kenelm. And from there, they were able to work backwards and actually piece together lost history. Picking out the nonsense of the eyes bursting, obviously. The dove
flying.
that didn't happen. All right?
How do you know?
Just
I wasn't there. I mean, when's the last time I saw somebody's head get knocked off? Well,
There's a dove every time.
right. It explains why I have so much trouble holding thoughts in my head, because there's not as much brain in there as I think there is. It's all dove and scrolls and pens, writing notes in case of emergency.
I mean, what do you have to do? A little bird told him.
Yeah.
Little birdie told me. That's going to be my excuse moving forward. Why's your penis on fire? Bird told me. That literally made no sense. Bam. Yeah. So the actual history, again, early 19th century, archaeologists and historians, again, we can have an ethical decision, or grave robbers, but historians nonetheless.
Is the amount of time.
That's, all right, Indy, calm down. But the true history is that Kenelm died before Kenulf, but he died as an adult. Okay? In probably 811, in a battle versus the filthy Welsh, my people. And the tradition of the time was that violent death of a king or a prince was an immediate passport to martyrdom. You were canonized. You became a saint. Hence the tale, the Saint Kenelm.
Interesting.
And people told this stuff drunk around a fire in the 8th century, in the 9th century, and continued to tell it because it's interesting. It's more interesting than that guy died. What else you got? And it's an expression of human creativity because you can really tell when the bard telling the story was losing the audience. Yeah, and then there was a few... Her eyes burst!
my God, Scott.
Yes.
Her eyes burst. And then we began. So our next tale is going to examine the forking between history and a folk history and the folklore, in how they all sort of tell the same story. And for this one, we're heading to Scotland. So goodbye, England. Hello, Scotland. I don't think that's correct.
That's France, idiot.
So, be nice. We're heading to the year 1320. This is Braveheart times. If you have seen Braveheart, this is like literally Braveheart times.
Everyone has blue faces and kilts. Got it.
The Scots do.
Swords and blue faces.
So the person that betrays Mel Gibson's character in the end is Robert the Bruce. This is shortly after that movie. Robert the Bruce is currently the king at this point in Scotland. So everybody, again, filthy, but most guys are wearing dresses.
Okay, great.
Very accessible. Love it. So we're on the southeast part of Scotland. We're on the border. We're just on the other side of Hadrian's Wall. And we are talking about Lord William De Soulis, a.k.a., this guy's got a lot of aliases, a.k.a. Terrible William, a.k.a. the Lord of Tiddesdale, exciting, Liddesdale, my bad, a.k.a. the Butler of Scotland. The Butler of Scotland was a title. I see you have questions.
I have many.
Here's what Wikipedia tells me, is that it is a self-referencing page that goes back to itself when you try to look up what the hell that means. But I did find a list of 7 butlers of Scotland. 6 of them were De Soulis's. The troublesome 3rd butler was not. It makes you wonder what happened. They tried something new and they're like,
He was the middle child.
Back to the De Soulis's. Terrible William, the last butler of Scotland. They'd had enough. So he lived in Hermitage Castle, which is not the kind of castle you're thinking of. It's just a big block fortress. It's still there. You can visit it. Easier to find pictures on the internet. It's a big, ugly square. Like no ramparts, no towers, nothing, just a big... Like the Borg set down. Perfect.
It's a Minecraft castle.
It's a Minecraft castle. Well, it's a Minecraft castle when you're learning to play the game. Yeah. So here's the actual history. William De Soulis was a real bad man. He was the guy that lived in the castle in the surrounding town. He was the lord. He had all the power. He collected the taxes from the people. And he sort of wandered around doing pure id. Doing murders, doing kidnappings, doing other gross stuff. I'll let your imaginations... None of it's good. Here are a few fun things he did. He had a horse-sized trapdoor. Because he's a lord, he's noble, he cannot be officially rebuked through most of the normal channels. Robert the Bruce, king at the time, would send horsebound messengers and be like, "Stop!" And he'd be like, "Plunk," and drop the messenger and the horse, right, through the giant horse-sized trapdoor. You'd think eventually they would just not fall anywhere, because he did this more than once. But maybe they had a clean out at the bottom, I don't know. He also tried to kidnap a young lady in town, but someone of medium standing? I can't find a lot about this guy, but he was held in high esteem and also had a little bit of money. He wasn't the lord, but like he was kind of upper crust for the peasantry. Alexander Armstrong was his name. He steps in and he's like, "I'm the White Knight." And Lord De Soulis is like, "You wound me, sir. Thank you for pointing out this terrible behavior. I've been so Join me at my evil castle for dinner, and we can talk more about this." Guy shows up, seats him down, there's a big fancy dinner, stabs him to death. Lord De Soulis. What a cool guy.
I really thought we were going for poison there for the dinner.
Yeah.
Nope.
It was really
So did I. As I was reading this, I'm like, oh, this is getting... He just walks up to him and goes, bleh.
Stick a fork in me. I'm done.
Yep. So what happened to this guy was eventually he gets rolled up in conspiring against the king, and the king is like, we're done. So the Black Parliament, which was Scotland's governing body under the king, like the advisory panel under the king, the Black Parliament, meets on the 4th of August, 1320, and they're like, okay, all these conspirators drawn, quartered, beheaded, blip. Lord De Soulis, because of his title, because of his station, it would be improper to do the same to him. Like, just put him in the dungeon, where he very quickly ceased to exist. Ta-da! Robert the Bruce disappeared him. Okay.
So he actually did disappear. He didn't just like escape and.
Oh no, he was like, this dungeon's terrible, and then they just murdered him down
Okay.
This is called an oubliette.
there is no door. I love an oubliette.
I mean, who doesn't?
Jareth from Labyrinth loves an oubliette. He puts a child in there. Yikes. Man, we saw some crazy stuff as kids, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
So that's the history. That is what actually happened. We know that through the historical record. We have evidence. It proves all that. The folk history is the history from a different perspective. So it's all true, it's all facts, with just sort of a fun, like, we were more involved, we the people were more involved. That's the folk history. Like, yeah, obviously these verifiable facts are all facts. But folk history is basically the same as the history, except instead of ending up in the dungeon, the peasants finally had enough and they rose up and they slew him. Then, the people telling the story are like, we did it, we're great, we took hold of our destiny. If you look back in the folklore, that happened to an ancestor of William De Soulis, Nicholas De Soulis, who lived about 150 years before, who was equally disgusting, and his servants were like, enough! And just murdered him. In the castle. Oh, what a fun place.
I can see why they just continued the role of butler.
Yes. We had a bad run. We're just going to shelve this. But the folklore, William is a warlock who keeps a magical man in a box. Would we like to hear that one?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, he kept a man in a box. The story says he was magical. Use your imagination. Alright, so this version comes from John Leyden's ballad from the 18th century titled Lord Soulis. So, a little bit of backstory on this version of William De Soulis. How did the people describe him to future generations and to people who were not local or familiar with the story? They're like, we need something universal that everybody understands is just evil. So, the story goes that Lord De Soulis studied under Michael Scott. Not that Michael Scott from The Office, a different one. One T. Michael Scott was basically the super wizard of Scottish folklore. He knew all the spells, he'd been to the realm of the Fae, he could do it all. Terribly. Studied at the, the Black School of Padua under the devil. He had no shadow because the devil took it. Because Michael Scott was so smart, he tricked the devil. So that's like the guy he's studying under. Everybody knows the wizard Michael Scott. They're like, oh, okay, yeah, no, this guy's definitely evil. Cool, that checks out. The man he keeps in a box. His name is Robin Redcap. He is... Have you ever seen a garden gnome?
Yeah.
Like the little red hats?
Yeah.
Okay, so the Fae are an entire separate discussion. They are deep. They are deserving of their own attention. If you ever step into the natural world, you are assuredly dealing with them in real life, and we should be respectful. Always carry an amethyst. So I'm not going to go too deep into them there, but suffice to say, those little gnomes with the red hats, they are normally jolly and fun in all folklore, except Scottish specifically, wherein their hats are red because they are soaked in human blood. And they will die if they don't continuously keep it wet with human blood. They're horrible. They can also run faster than any man. There is no escape. How do you get rid of them? If you quote a Bible verse at them, they will lose a tooth and run away. Which I wrote in my notes, infinite tooth hack?
I mean, you could run a real racket with a tooth fairy.
I mean, you gotta be bold, but you could do it. Also, maybe trading Fae parts to another Fae, not... I don't know. I don't want to speak for them.
It's not 108 back.
But, right. Your eyes may not burst. I won't say won't. It may not. So, Robin Redcap lives in a box in this guy's house. The creepy castle where all the bad stuff happens. Okay.
Aren't red caps supposed to be huge, though?
Yeah.
Yes. It's a big box.
Okay.
He has a deal with William De Soulis. Terrible William. I will make you invincible to damage. I will make you so that you cannot be bound by anything. But you must never look at me when I emerge from my magic box. Okay. So in order to get new enchantments put on him, new spells, this guy's like really going hard in playing Skyrim. He has to knock on the box 3 times and turn around until Robin gets out of his box, closes it, and then he can look at Robin Redcap and then magic, magic, magic. What does Robin get out of this? No accounts of this tale mention it at all. Rent-free? I don't know. The morning of our tale, knocks 3 times on the box. Lord De Soulis steps back around the corner, and he watches him emerge. Ooh, we're planting narrative device.
You spied on the thing.
He saw it. Oh no. By Robin's account, the enchantments have been broken. I wrote a note. He's basically this guy's game genie. Okay. The only way to... If he was still enchanted, the only way to buy him would... Bless you. Would be with ropes of sifted sand. Bless you. Now, ropes of sifted sand is a trope in this period of folklore. It is an analog for an impossible task. A ghost that is bound to a location. Oh, you can only escape when you weave a rope of sifted sand. Okay, so this ghost is going to haunt the place forever. So that's all it is. It's a device. But remember. And also, his invincibility will last until a forest moves. Like in Macbeth, which had been written before this ballad came out. And I think the author just really liked Macbeth.
We don't have to say it.
Forest is just cool.
We're not in the
I
theater.
work in the theatrical department store. So
We're okay. We're not in the
okay.
theater right now.
Not in the theater.
Or are we? We're not. We're in a conference room of a hotel.
Yes.
So enter our hero, young Beclou. I have
Bless you.
ruined my YouTube search history pronouncing a lot of these names coming up. But it's spelled Buclique, pronounced Beclou. So young Beclou is our guy. He's basically Alexander Armstrong from earlier, who was the guy that was like, no, 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 Lord De Soulis, do not kidnap that lady. It's the same story. He does that. So De Soulis picks him up, takes him to his dungeon, and he's like, what would you do, young Beclou, if I were you? So young Beclou, he's an analog for the average person. Anybody sitting at the pub telling this story. This is the self-insert Mary Sue. So everybody thinks they're smarter than they are. They don't know there's a dove in there pushing their brain around. So he plays for time because he's clever, because he's you. Said, I would have you hang me from the tree of my choice. Cool, then that's what we're going to do to you. De Soulis takes young Beclou out into the woods. He's like, choose the tree from which you hang. Young Beclou's just like, I don't know, I'm not really feeling these trees. Can I see some more trees? And this goes on and on. And listen, this whole thing is written in vernacular and is really hard to translate. So I read like 5 pages that I didn't need to. This is like the Herman Melville of Scottish folklore. 5 pages describing trees he didn't want to be strung up from. We get it! We get it! He's playing for time. So imagine an amount of time has passed. Enter Bold Walter. His last name, or his surname, is also Buccleuch. He is related to young Buccleuch in some way. It's unclear if he's a cousin or a brother or an uncle, whatever. But Bold Walter's got the boys. This is basically like an Avengers Assemble kind of scene, because there's like the names on these guys are all over the board. But he shows up with the guys with a little bit of witch hazel in their hats. What does that look like, Macbeth? Anybody? Yeah. To prevent from enchantment, because witch hazel is supposed to protect you from enchantment. And they start moving in on Lord De Soulis. And again, nobody else points out, this sounds a bit like Macbeth. The bard heard Macbeth. It's fine.
The bard broke Macbeth.
I thought the same thing.
Possible.
The bar actually read it.
So here is a great quote. The only quote I am giving you from the ballad, because it is exceptional. Bold Walter draws his bow, steadies an arrow on Terrible William, who remember, has violated the rules of Robin Redcap, is vulnerable now, and, quote, shoots an arrow straight in the face of William De Soulis. Not in the head, not in the body, in the face. And much to our narrative dismay, it bounces off, no effect. What is the point of any of this story? It's to entertain people. It goes on and on. They're like, okay, well, get some rope. They tie him up. He just, bloop, right out of it. So they get some chains. Chain him up. Bloop, right out of it. What are they going to do? One of the Avengers that has assembled is a man known by the name of either True Thomas or Thomas the Rhymer. They brought their fresh MC. He spent some time in the realm of the Fae, and he has a spell book that has some of Michael Scott's spells in it. So, fit. He's going through there, and what does he find but a spell to make ropes of sifted sand? That doesn't work. It just doesn't work. We set up all of these plot devices, all of this narration. None of it works. I'd like to come up with some kind of allegory here, but it's just bad writing.
That's why you guys can trust each child rolling.
They try some other stuff, nothing works. So they're like milling around for just reading through all this stuff, the amount of time it must have taken them, like, try this spell. Like an hour has gone by. And remember, De Soulis cannot be bound, and he's invincible. So he's just hanging out with them now. Like,
Go ahead, try it.
yeah, what else are you gonna do? Where do we go?
What else you got?
So they basically just give up. They're like, okay, well, how about this? They take him to a place, it's a standing stone site, an old druid circle. It's called Nine Stain Rig. It's an area of outstanding national beauty. You can still go see where the foundations of these stones were. But they take him to Nine Stain Rig, and he just goes with them. They have no means of compelling him to go. He's just like, all right. So he just goes with them.
He's Q.
Yeah, he's basically Q from the Next Generation. So they go to a local abandoned cottage. They pull some lead off the roof. They roll him up like a taquito, and they plop him in a big cauldron, and they boil him. And he dies. Like the Terminator.
What?
Yes.
Good writing.
Yeah.
Good writing.
But that's the one that survived because it's insane. This is how we know our history.
And for once, I actually like the historical count better than the folklore.
Yeah, the folklore is nuts.
Yes.
Whew. Right? Okay, so to round out our little buffet here, we're going to head over to Ireland. And it is my very great honor to introduce you to the greatest Irish name I have ever heard. And it's interesting because I was really nerdily, academically into folklore for years before I stumbled across this legend, but it's everywhere. There are parts of Ireland that are still named after this guy. There are geographical features that still have this guy's name on it today. You can find them on Google Maps. Or you can go there too, that's fine.
I love how you say you used to be really academically nerdy.
Right, used to be.
Huh?
Huh?
Okay, audience time is done.
He used all the academics and he got it all.
I'm done. The dub pushed it out of my brain. So,
Listen here, Doug Brain.
these are things that supposedly happened, right, in the 3rd century in Ireland. All these tales were collected in the early 19th century. And this is my example of folklore defining the world around you. So the obvious choice here, when I was like, I think there's a whole section of folklore that just describes human interaction with what we see and don't understand. That is the world around us. And the natural human way of wanting to give a story to something, or why is that there, and answering that. And the obvious choice there is, when you're looking at British folklore, it's giants. And they're not super interesting. Gog Magog. If you ever look up anything about foundational folklore, it's Gog Magog. And it's Geoffrey of Monmouth, who was a madman in the 12th century, who wrote Britannicae something. I almost said rectum. Regnum.
Rectum. I fucking knew it.
Yeah, Britanniae Regnum Historiae, which was this is the literal true history of Britain, because we're now in the medieval ages when he's writing this, and it's okay, books disappeared, but this is the true history. He's Britain was founded by giants, and it's totally batshit crazy, but it's also super boring. So let me save you 2 hours of reading if you're ever interested. Gog Magog is a giant. He lives with other giants. The Romans show up. They kill all the giants. The Britons are giants because they want to feel like winners in their old sad history where they were conquered. Ta-da! Done.
Beautiful.
You're welcome. I was okay, we can do this better. Because this story has giants, but it also gets us to Ireland. And it describes a folk hero who is basically what we might look at as James Bond in the 50s and 60s, or Sherlock Holmes in the 19th century. It's this fictional character that is a culmination of what the culture values as the peak cool guy. So it's not only looking at the landscape and how it got that way and describing it through these fanciful tales, it's also what did they care about? What did they value? Who did they think was the cool guy? And that cool guy had the most radical 90s name, and his name is literally Finn McCool. I shit you not. This is a 3rd century legend of a man named Finn McCool. It is the most offensively Irish name I have ever heard in my life. There's a Scottish version because they liked the story so much they picked him up and they renamed him Finn MacCool. Because when you have the perfect name, it doesn't need much work. These tales come to us from Oisin the Bard. Oisin the Bard, fun fact, also a fictional character.
Wow.
Right. So Oisin is supposedly Finn's son, and he is the embodiment of the greatest poet. So all of the great poems and ballads from pre-novelization history, so we're talking anything before the 12th century, is attributed to Oisin the Bard, who isn't real, but it's basically saying, we really like this. Everybody really likes this. So the guy that we made up that is the best at writing wrote it. And nobody said anything about it. We're
We're cool with this.
Yeah.
Mick Cool.
Yeah. Oisin the Bard is Finn McCool's son, and also the son of his mom is a deer. I know it's late at night. We're in the PM hours here. It's folklore lates. I will spare you the details. There are many books on this subject if you want to. It's
Human deer husbandry.
Okay.
I know smut's big these days,
I mean, I'm sure.
Go for it.
but we're gonna push through. So what are the traits that 3rd century Irish clansfolk thought were like, this is the peak cool guy? So you've got some obvious ones. He's big. Now, he's not a giant. It very specifically goes into detail about how the giants are different. But he's really, really big. And he's really, really strong and brave. So someone who can protect from roving wild animals. Somebody who can provide for the family through hunting. These are good traits. So far, so obvious. But the other interesting things, like the foundational lore of Finn McCool, is that he is incredibly wise, unflinchingly friendly, and an incredible poet. So what was cool in the 3rd century? Art, knowing stuff, and not being a dick. That's a cool window to look through to history. That I like. So here's the foundational stories. And there's like 1,000 of these. Imagine how many James Bond movies there are now, or Sherlock Holmes stories. Like they just go on and on and on and on and on. And even now, that like Sherlock Holmes in the public domain, there's like so many new stories. It's just an identifiable character that people look at and like, oh, that's cool. Like, 'cause it's got like these attributes that like I think I'd like to have, or like I think are really neat. So there are so many stories. I'm just giving you like a 50,000-foot view of Finn McCool. There is so much more on this guy, and it's all batshit crazy. So when he was 10 years old, the capital of Ireland at the time was a town called Tara, and every year, for 23 years, on Samhain, Boo, Holy Day, which is New Year, right? It's October 31st, the town is burned down.
What?
Yeah, by a fire-breathing man of the Tuatha Dé Danann.
Too hot to handle? What?
Tuatha Dé Danann. I wrote it all phonetically, because it's all in Gaelic. Again, YouTube. Tuatha Dé Danann. The Tuatha Dé Danann were like a mythical race of... Lord of the Rings. Okay, so Aragorn is like 400 years old, even though he's a human, because he's like part of this like special like mythical race of like sort of humans. Tuatha Dé Danann, the same thing. They're like mythical, like they're people, but like they all each have like different unique powers. This particular one could breathe fire, so he'd show up, he'd play his dulcimer, bear with me, which put everybody to sleep, and while they were asleep, he would burn the town down, which didn't kill them, but it was a problem.
And you get your granddad.
So, at 10 years old, Finn McCool shows up, and he's like, he's 10, right? He's just like, take care of that Tuatha Dé Danann problem you got. Because I'm radical. I'm Finn McCool. So there's like a bunch of stuff that's just like, gosh, just goes on and on. But he gets a magical spear and then just like doots the dude on the head and he just like dies. Town saved.
He does the doots.
Dude. So that is his example of being big, strong, and brave. Now we all know about the salmon of knowledge, right? Yeah. It's that fish that knows a lot. Naturally. The salmon of knowledge is the Irish version of like a really common folk trope. There's a Scandinavian version. It's eating of Fenrir's heart. There's like 1,000 examples in Welsh mythology, and they all have to do with a cauldron. Because when you're talking about an agrarian society where farming and food is the heart of the culture, everything goes around the cook pot, of course. And there's also a Scottish version of this that likewise involves a cauldron. But the salmon of knowledge is... It boils down to... There's some mythical... Boils down... I don't even do this on purpose. It boils down to there's some mythical energy in the world, and the lucky person stumbles across the opportunity to consume this animal and thus gains its knowledge. In this case, we have both the wisdom and the poetry in one easy to digest. I won't call it a capsule. It's more of a suppository. But I'm leaving out all of the extra details. Basically, Finn's living in the woods with this guy who's like a really great poet at the time, and he's studying poetry under this guy. And he just lives in a hut alone in the woods. Nice, right?
That sounds great.
Yeah. But he sends him out every day. He's like, go fish by this pond, go to the specific part of the river or a pond or wherever he's fishing, and like salmon or what, river fish?
Well, they did both.
Sure. They're in water, fresh water, right?
Yeah. Fresh.
I don't know. I'm
And
just
salt. Both.
spitball. It's a fish. It lives in water. I don't know. So it's like always go to the specific spot, fish it up, whatever. So they do this a couple of days. They get a fish. They eat. They learn poetry. I don't even know how to just like. It's just like facts. They're like, well, naturally the salmon ate nuts of wisdom. Book, help me. What is that?
Is there like a wisdom food chain?
No details follow.
I don't.
I googled it too. I'm like, help me! I have all the books. I don't see nuts of wisdom anywhere. I assume they fell off a tree overhanging the river. And fish don't eat nuts. They don't. They don't eat nuts. This one did. Whatever. And
Are you sure you mean those kind of
I know.
nuts?
Yeah, I feel like I'm missing some great opportunities here.
unfortunately, I am not sure. I am making an educated guess in a world of nonsense.
You need some salmon of knowledge, I think.
I do. I lack the knowledge that a nut-fed salmon could bring to me. So brings the fish back. This poet cooks it up, burns his thumb on the skillet. Is like, puts his thumb in his mouth, and then has the wisdom of the universe, and just like, oops, oh. We done did the salmon of knowledge, and ensures that Finn eats the fish. Because he's already got the baby thumb suck of knowledge. so too does Finn. But it's also like in other versions, or like in other stories and stuff, like when he needs to be really wise, it says that Finn's just kind of like, oh. Which shouldn't do anything, because he already has the knowledge. More on that in a minute. So, studied under this poet, and he's got this wisdom magically. And then we have his last defining characteristic of being an elderly baby man. Real quick, there's like somebody lost a coin in a pond. In some versions of the story, it's a fountain, but it's a stranger. That's the point. It's just like this really off-putting strangers, like, my coin's in the fountain. They're like, oh, you didn't like the wish you got? I'm so sorry. I'll go get that for you. So Finn is just like, don't worry, I'm gonna get it. Whether it's a pond, a fountain, whatever. He's just like, yeah, I'm gonna go in there and swims down and like finds the coin. And when he emerges from the body of water, he is an elderly man, white hair, wrinkled, and nobody recognizes him except for his two goodest boys. There is an entire folk history on his two dogs, and they are the goodest boys. Their names are, Bron I can pronounce. The other one I can't. It is too Gaelic, and I couldn't find a good a translation of it. But their names, if translated to English, mean Survivor and Raven. Those are good dog names. And in every account, they're the goodest boys. So they're just like, oh no, this is Finn, cool guys. So like, they recognize him immediately. They run him back to like the old wizard or whatever that cursed him. And he's like, oh, you got me. No details whatsoever in the story. Guy's just like, okay, changes him back, but his hair stays white forever. That's a mark of his friendship, his willingness to help everybody. His traits. Let me tell you about the giants. So, a lot of these giants aren't named, which is interesting because giants are a big deal in British folklore, and they've all got stupid names. But in this case, only one of them has a name, and we'll get to him at the end. But he fights this English giant. Just a giant, just like, here I come. And he's like, well, this is my thing. I'm just a big cool guy. Fights the giant. In fighting the giant, he scoops up a big section of earth and throws it at the giant. He misses, it lands in the sea. What he scooped up is known now as Loch Ness. The big plop of land that landed in the sea, the Isle of Man, and a little nugget that fell off Isle of Man as it was heading out into the sea is called Rockall, which is just the high point of like, looking at like actual maps now, you're like, ooh, it's supposed to be cursed or whatever, but like the ground is like so barely under the surface of the water. It's like, sailors hate it. Well, yeah, it's... I digress. And there are many, many, many more stories like this that describe the creation of the land in Ireland. Why is this? So if we're surveying, we go up on this tall hill, we can see there's a loch, there's a rock, there's an island. All in a straight line. Human creativity. How did it get there? We all know about Finn McCool. Super strong guy. Maybe he's like just... Blah! Why would he do that? Oh man, good point. Finn McCool is a good guy. Oh, he must have been fighting a giant. That's cool. Because it's people just looking at stuff and being creative, which we all are and we all have in us. And it's just beautiful. There is a cave, you can still find it on Google Maps, called Fingal's Cave. Fingal is another name for Finn. Finn McCool, shorthand, Fingal. Called Fingal's Cave because it's just a small slit in a mountainside, but if you pass inside, it's like 60 feet tall inside. So that's the folklore on that, is like, oh, it must be Finn McCool's cave because he could stand up in there. So it's still called Fingal's Cave or Finn McCool's Cave. It's an actual geographical feature, still with that name today. And I will close with an introduction to Finn McCool's wife. Another interesting look. What does peak wife look like? If we know what peak radical 90s guy looks like. So this is the story of Benandonner, a very Irishly named Scottish giant, because it's an Irish folktale and everybody's got an Irish name. But he's a big, like real big, like extra big giant. And Finn McCool hears word that one of his side projects is bearing ill fruit. There's a geographical feature in Northern Ireland called the Giant's Causeway. It looks like a bunch of standing stones on the edge of the island, like just giant, like they're hexagonal columns, like natural basalt formations. They look almost like stepping stones descending into the sea. And if you have an imagination, they go right towards Scotland. So there is a very real place called the Giant's Causeway, and there is a very fictional place in folklore where the Giant's Causeway was a complete stepping stone bridge all the way to Scotland that Finn McCool built so he wouldn't have to get his feet wet when he went over to the other island. Neat. But Benandonner is coming to town, and Finn McCool's like, I don't think I can get this one. He's real big. His wife, Una, is like, honey, sweet radical child, I got this. So, who is the wife of the coolest guy? What does peak woman look like who is a married woman in this culture? And that has one answer. It is Una McCool, because she takes 0 Fs from anybody. She is tough, she is smart, and she is confident. Hell yeah. So, Benandonner shows up, and she's like, honey, I've got a plan. Dress up like a baby, and get in the tub. Finn McCool never asks a question. He's like, weird, but I'm going with it. Or maybe that's something, I'm not going to go down that pathway. Just weird, we're going with it. Alright. So, he's dressed up like a giant baby. Benandonner shows up. He's like, is, Finn McCool home? Because, I want to talk to him. And Una's like, oh, no, he's just out a bit, but you're welcome to come inside and, hang out. He'll be home pretty quick. Just, I got the baby here and I was, cooking up some food. Why don't you have a seat? And he's like, yeah, okay. As he's coming inside, there's a giant pine tree outside their house that has a big stone on top. Right? No details followed. I tried. I'm like, why? Why is that there? Couldn't find it in any other story. And she's like, oh, yeah, that's my husband's spear. And he's just kind of like, huh. All right. No problem. I'm the biggest giant. So it goes inside. Lord knows how big their house was. Right? Because he just goes inside. No problems. And has a seat, I don't know, on the couch? And he's just picking up rocks and just like smashing them like between his like thumb and forefinger, like, I'm pretty tough, just smashing these rocks. You seeing this? And she's like, yeah, it's fine. I'm just cooking up some food. Are you hungry? He's like, yeah, make me some food. Cool. So she's making these like griddle cakes. But she's slipping like cast iron skillets into a few of them. And she finishes one up with the skillet inside. And he's like, oh, here you go. It's Finn's favorite. And he takes a bite out of it and cracks a few of his teeth. And he's like, whoa! And Noon's just kind of like, well, that's a bit weak. Finn eats these all the time. You want another one? He's like, no, that's fine. Who's that? Pointing to Finn in the tub. He's just like, oh, and she's like, oh, that's our baby. It's fine. And he eats these all the time, too. Gives him one of the non-skilleted cakes. No. It's really Finn McCool, right? And he's like, yeah, you know what? I'm gonna head out. Gets up and sprints out so fast that he destroys the Giant's Causeway, the part that's in the sea. Which is why only the standing stones on the coast of Northern Ireland are still standing. That's kind of like the big, like, Dr. No to James Bond of Finn McCool. That's like the big, like, the Finn McCool story. But I encourage you, if you are interested in a radical boy, there are entire books on this guy, and you're never going to read the same story twice. Did I mention the part where he's got a son with a deer? Yikes. Okay, so those are my 3 stories that should have hopefully demonstrated how folklore can preserve history when history would otherwise be lost, and how it can tell the people's perspective in a fun and creative way, and also function to be a creative vehicle to describe the people we want to be, the people we think are the best versions of ourselves, and the world, how it came to be, that cool big tree, the hole in the ground. It's part of us, and it continues now. Taking it back to the beginning, folklore isn't just the oral tradition, it's art, it's dance, it's ritual. If you attended opening ritual, you are doing the same thing that people hundreds, if not 1,000 years ago were doing. You are part of that living folk memory. But it's also different because it's now, it's through a modern lens, and it's the way you're doing it. Much in the same way you may base rituals and spells you do in your own personal witchcraft on things you've read in like the Scott Cunningham books, or other practitioners that you've learned from or seen or thought, wow, that's a really cool idea, plus my own creativity. Yes, be creative. Yes, that is where your magic comes from. It comes from inside of you through the lens of everything else we've done and come together and said, that's kind of neat. Even if it's not the terrible William. We don't need to do that. Right? Not all ideas are good ideas. A horse-sized trapdoor. Neat in practice, in execution, yikes. But listen to yourself. If you have an idea of just like, I think this is how my magic flows, I think this is how my creativity flows, pull that thread, follow that thread. Even if you're looking at it through the lens of history, through the lens of other ritual, it's all the same thing, and it's all good. If anybody has any questions about the absolute mad journey we all just took together, I am all weekend happy to answer them, or if even this evening. Yes.
So, okay, Finn dressed up as a baby.
Yeah.
Which is a convincing way already to disguise yourself as a baby. If I were to dress up as a baby, you'd believe that. And then went into the tub, dressed.
Yeah. Well, he was a big guy, so you imagine the tub is probably like a big guy-sized cradle. My question is, why did they have that size baby clothes?
I would make it with just a diaper and a bonnet, right?
You don't know that.
But do you go into the tub with your diaper on?
We don't kink shame here.
I learned a beaut that, yes, we don't kink shame here. I also learned a delightful phrase from a young person I work with. I don't want to yuck anyone's yum.
That's a good one.
So what the McCools get up to in the privacy of their own catastrophically large house is up to them. If that wasn't terribly off-putting to you, I do have another panel on Saturday where we're going to be doing the Welsh slice of this, diving into the Mabinogion, which is historically relevant. It was the first British novel. It was the first piece of writing in British, Welsh, English, Scottish, Irish writing that wasn't a ballad or a poem. It also exists from a time before a narrative device was understood. It is Whiplash Central. So if you're interested in a Welsh version of this, Saturday at 2:30. If not, cool. Lots of excellent presentations and workshops and rituals going on this weekend. If you run into me and you have further questions over the weekend, I'm always happy to talk about this stuff. I could talk for another 3 hours. But as stated off the rip, it is past my bedtime. So I am going to bid you all adieu. Get some rest. Keep that energy grounded. And please find playstations like this where you can just and relax as the weekend goes on because it is long. Get out. Thank you.
I want to know what joke you had planned that I missed.
I forgot to say it.
Well, I know, so now I need to know. What was that?
I missed my note because I was like in the flow. It was, okay, so when I was in 4th grade, I had to do a social studies project where we had to look up our names and the origins of them and write a little report on it. I am 2nd generation Welsh. My parents named me Scott. I looked it up. It literally means native of Scotland. That's like being from Virginia and naming your kid West.
Yep. Oh my god, I love that.
We got it in.
I giggled the second